Hello students, this is your science teacher Priyanka Raut and we are starting with our third chapter in science, that is force and pressure. So be attentive and let's begin with the topic. Now let's recall what we have learned in our lower classes. We had learned Newton's first law of motion, which states that an object at rest will remain at rest. Look at the first picture of a ball which is at rest. So it will continue being in rest unless acted on by an unbalanced force, unless somebody pushes the ball or kicks the ball. Whereas if the object is in motion, it will continue to be in motion with constant speed and in the same direction. Can you see the third picture where the ball is moving? So here it will continue its state of motion till it is acted by an unbalanced force. Can you see the last picture, the fourth picture, where the ball is hitting the net? So this net is the unbalanced force acting on the ball, which is stopping the motion of the ball. So this is Newton's first law of motion. Okay. Okay, now let us see types of forces. Now under types of forces, we have two categories. First is contact forces and the other is non-contact forces. Now contact forces are forces experienced by bodies when they are in physical contact with each other. The word contact itself tells us there is some connection, correct? So in these forces, you will find that the force which is being applied on the body. So both the one who is applying the force and the body on which the force is being applied, they are in contact with each other. So we have the subcategories of contact forces, which is muscular force and frictional force. Now muscular is whenever you have any force exerted by the muscles, pushing, pulling, banging. Okay, so all these are muscular forces. Or when you're pedaling your cycle, or so wherever your muscles are utilized to generate force, these are muscular forces. Next, frictional force. Now whenever there is a friction between the motion which is being applied and the object with the surface, so the force acting opposite to the direction of the motion. So for example, I have a very heavy object to move and I'm trying to push it, okay, push it forward, but because of the weight there is friction on the floor. So though I am pushing the object, it will take time for the object to move ahead because the force acting is in the opposite direction of the motion of the object. So here the box will try to stay in its original place, correct, and the motion or the force is acting on it is in the other direction, so it will try to move it in the other direction, and this leads to okay. Now let us see what is non-contact force. Forces experienced by bodies even if they are not in physical contact with each other. So the word again non-contact tells us they are not connected with each other. So the body on which the force is being applied and the body which is applying the force, there is no contact between them. They are away from each other. So first we have magnetic force. So this is basically force exerted by a magnet. So you keep a magnet near to an iron nail at a minimum distance, you will find it gets attracted towards it. This is because of the magnetic field. So this is a non-contact force. Then we have the electrostatic force, force exerted by a charged body on another charged body. So here we have an example of the experiment which we have been trying over the years. That is, you take a comb, hair comb, you rub it onto your scalp, okay? Then take tiny bits of paper, bring this hair comb near to the bits of paper, and you will find the bits of paper start moving up or they start jumping up, and they get attracted towards the uh, towards the uh, towards the hair comb. Now here, this is because the hair comb got charged and it is transferring its charge to another body, which is the bits of paper. So this kind of charge is known as electrostatic charge. And the third one is gravitational force. We all are able to walk on the surface of the earth because of the gravitational force, or else we all would have been floating in air, right? So this gravitational force is keeping us attracted towards the earth's surface. So it's pulling us towards the earth's core. So attractive force exerted between two objects is known as gravitational force. So the force exerted by the earth's crust on all the bodies on its surface is known as the gravitational force. So contact and non-contact forces are clear. Under contact forces we have muscular and frictional. Under non-contact we have magnetic force, electrostatic force and gravitational force. Okay, we move further, we will see few more types of forces. More examples of forces. So contact forces, you can have force like applied force, spring force, drag force, frictional force, normal force. So these are just examples given to you just for your extra knowledge. And non-contact force is the same one. Uh, the forces like attraction, repulsion. So we have the magnetic force, same electric force or the electrostatic force which we saw in the earlier slide, and the gravitational force. Let us study this experiment to prove that there exists a non-contact force between the two magnets. So first we take a tray, a plastic tray filled with water or a glass tray. We put in empty bottles, okay. Uh, Make sure the bottles are closed using a cap. Now we place bar magnets on both the bottles. Now we have learned in our lower classes that unlike poles of a magnet attract each other and the like poles of a magnet repel each other. So first I will bring the bottles near to each other in such a way that the opposite poles are facing towards each other. Now because of this you observe that the bottles start moving closer and closer, which proves that it is showing the attraction property of a magnet. And the unlike poles are trying to get attracted or move towards each other. Now same thing I will try again by turning one bottle. So when I turn one of the bottles, now I will have like poles towards each other. So I will have the south pole in the inner side of both the magnets. Now when we bring the like poles towards each other, we observe that the two bottles start moving far away from each other, which states that there is a non-contact force, which is the magnetic force between the two magnets. So even they are not connected with each other, still they are showing attraction and repulsion. Okay, this is a very important experiment. So whenever they ask you, state an experiment where you prove that non-contact force does exist between two magnets, you have to explain this experiment with this diagram. Okay. Let us see the meaning of balanced and unbalanced forces. Look at the picture here which shows a table. On the table they have placed a cardboard box. A string is being attached on both the sides, and there are weighing pans which are placed on both sides of the string. Now here these weighing pans are added with equal weights. Now when equal weights are added in both the weighing pans, we observe that the box doesn't move from the table. Whereas when one of the pan is added with more of the weight, the box starts moving in the direction of the pan with more mass. So earlier there was equal gravitational force acting on both the pans with equal mass. But now, since mass in one of the pan is more, the more gravitational force will be exerted on it. So we can conclude that when unequal forces are applied to the box on the two sides, an unbalanced force acts on the box, resulting in motion of the box. Yes, we will see now another example. Look at the other picture which shows children playing tug of war. Now we all know in tug of war you have a set of people on both sides who try to pull the rope on their side. If the pull of force is equal on the two sides, the rope does not move. If the force is more on one side, the rope moves in that direction. This means that initially the two forces are balanced, and then the rope moves in the direction of the higher force when the force becomes unbalanced. So when the force becomes unbalanced, you see the rope is being pulled in one direction. So in which direction it will move? Wherever more force is applied. Okay. So you will see movement only when unbalanced forces are applied on a body. So what are balanced and unbalanced forces is clear with everyone. So we will see what do we conclude from these examples in the next slide. So let us see what we have learned from the examples given in the earlier slide. If several forces are applied on an object in the same direction, a force equal to their addition acts on that object. I'll give the example of tug of war. Several forces acting on the rope, correct? So the result of the force will be nothing but equal to the addition of all these forces acting on the rope. So here my rope is the object, several forces are the children who are pulling the rope, and force equal to their addition means total force applied by all the children on one side. Clear? So first conclusion is clear. Second one, if two forces are applied on one object in directions opposite to each other, a force equal to their difference acts on the object. Now, take the first example. Table with a weighing pan, with weighing pans on both the sides and a cardboard box. If two forces are applied on the object, so weighing pan is applying force on the object, both the weighing pans. Now same force is being applied by them, correct? So equal force is being applied by them on the object, that is the cardboard. So there is no difference in the weight, therefore zero force is being applied by them on the object, and therefore the cardboard is not moving. Okay. Third one, a force is expressed in magnitude and direction Force is a vector quantity. Now force always shows us the direction also in which the body is moving and how much it is moving depending on the magnitude of the force applied, right? So whenever there is any motion, it is because of the force applied and in a particular direction, right? Therefore, force is expressed in magnitude as well as direction. Now, whenever you have any quantity where direction is being considered, it is known as a vector quantity. Whereas the other quantities where direction is not considered, they are known as scalar quantities. Like you have the mass of a body, you have length of an object, height of a person. Okay. So the three conclusions are clear. Okay, in the beginning of the chapter, we had discussed that every body which is at rest tries to be at rest unless it is acted upon by an unbalanced force, or if the body is in motion, it will continue in its motion unless it is being obstructed by an unbalanced force, and a body at constant speed will continue moving in the same direction unless it is being interrupted by any unbalanced force. So this property is nothing but inertia. So this is the new term which we are learning here. So basically inertia is a property of an object that resists changes in its motion. Then a property of an object at rest which tends to stay at rest. And third, an object in motion tends to keep moving at the constant speed in straight line. So now here we will see few more examples so that this concept of inertia is clear with you all. Okay. Look at the picture given here. There is a glass filled with water and a cardboard sheet is placed on it. A coin is placed in the center of the cardboard sheet. Now when the cardboard is flicked, the coin falls into the glass. Okay. Now this happens because the coin has inertia of rest. Okay. And it tries to be at the same position though the cardboard below it has moved, and therefore it falls into the glass. Clear? So this is inertia at rest. We will see few more examples further. So we have basically three types of inertia: inertia of rest, inertia of motion, and inertia of direction. Let us see further some examples of them. Look at the first example given here for inertia of rest. The person is standing in a bus which is not moving. Okay, so the person is able to stand steady. As soon as the bus starts moving, the person is pushed backward because though the bus is moving forward, the body still tries to be at rest, and therefore it is resisting that movement, and because of which the person will feel the jerk or the backward movement of the body. So this is inertia of rest. second example, inertia of motion. The person who is driving a car and suddenly applies brake. He or she will feel that jerk, right? This is because the body is already in motion with the car, correct? So immediately when you apply brakes, the body is going to resist that change, and therefore you can feel that jerk whenever brakes are applied on whenever brakes are applied when you're traveling in a moving vehicle. Okay. Look at the third example given for inertia of direction. Now if you tie a ball to a string and rotate it above your head, it will move in circles, right? But as soon as you release it, the ball will move in a straight path outside, correct? That is in the tangential path. Outside means it is going to continue to move in the same path, but as soon as you stop, it will start moving in a straight path, tangential to your circular path. So this is inertia of direction. Okay. So it will continue to move in the same direction in which the body was moving. Now you must have observed the tires of two-wheelers and four-wheelers getting pressurized. They get flattened, correct? The air filling machine which is being used to fill air into the wheel has a meter, or it has a digital meter which shows the reading of pressure. Now this machine fills the pressure to a certain value. Now you are aware that force has to be applied for filling air in the bicycle tire with a hand pump. We all have seen that, or we have filled air into our bicycles, right? By applying force, air pressure is increased and then the air is pushed into the tire. Correct? So now think and tell me, is there any relation between force and pressure? Yes. So these two terms are related to each other. Now let us see how are they related to each other. Pressure is the force applied perpendicular to the surface of an object per unit area over which that force is distributed. I'll repeat. Pressure is the force applied perpendicular to the surface of an object per unit area over which that force is distributed. So look above for the picture which will explain you better what is pressure. So finally we define pressure as the amount of force applied per unit area on an object surface in perpendicular direction, and with the help of this we derive a formula for pressure, that is force applied upon per unit area. So the formula will be P is equal to capital F upon capital A. Capital P stands for pressure, capital F stands for force, capital A stands for area. Now the unit used for pressure is Pascal and the symbol is capital P and small a. Okay. Now here, please remember the unit 1 Pascal is equal to 1 Newton per meter square. Now why it is equal to 1 Newton per meter square? Look at the formula itself. Pressure unit is Pascal. So 1 Pascal is equal to, force unit is Newton and area unit is meter square. So 1 Pascal is equal to N upon M square. This is how we get the relation between them. Now 1 kilopascal is equal to 1000 Pascal. Just remember this relation also, which will be utilized when we do our numericals. Now let us see pressure in gases. Now whenever gas is being enclosed in a container, it always exerts pressure equally inside the container, on all the sides of the container. So here we have taken an example for balloon. When you fill air into the balloon, it inflates equally in all directions. Okay. Now let us see pressure in solids. Now in solids, the pressure acts in the direction of the force only. Smaller the area, higher is the pressure. Larger the area, smaller is the pressure. I'll give you an example. Your school bags. You have a belt for your school bag. Now, we always have a broader belt to our school bag so that the pressure is distributed. So, larger the area, less is the pressure felt on your shoulders. But instead of that, if I take a narrow belt, okay, a very thin rope-like belt, and you fill up your bag with a lot of books, what is going to happen? Your shoulders are going to get hurt because lesser the area, more is the pressure which is being felt by the object. Okay, so here in solids, pressure is only acted on the body in the direction of the force being applied. Clear? Now let us see pressure in liquids. Now in liquids also, the pressure has been exerted in all directions. Therefore, it is exerting pressure on the inner walls of the container in all directions. So look at the picture given here. First one, pressure in liquids increases with depth. Look at this tall cylinder given here. It is filled with water. It has 3 outlets. Now the outlet which is at the lowest or the bottom of the cylinder, there the water is going to flow with more pressure compared to the above 2 outlets. So here, as the depth of the container increases, the pressure at the bottom of the container will also increase. Look at the second picture where we have a plastic bag filled with water and there are some holes which are being pierced into the plastic bag. We observe that the water comes out from all the directions, not that a particular direction the water is not going to come. No, the water will come out from all the directions, from all the holes which are being pierced into the plastic bag. So in liquids as compared to gases, the pressure acts in all directions and therefore they have a common term which is being used, that is fluids, because both of them flow. Remember this. So gases as well as liquids are together known as fluids because both of them show the property of flowing. Okay, and that too flowing in all the directions. Clear? So we have discussed pressure in gases, pressure in solids, and pressure in liquids. So there are several examples in your textbooks. I have just taken few examples here, but you can go through the examples given in the textbook. Okay, they will help you to understand this concept even better. Now let us see what is the meaning of the term air pressure or atmospheric pressure. Now, there is an air column above us all the time. The weight of the air in the atmosphere causes air pressure. So basically, air pressure or atmospheric pressure is nothing but the weight of that column which is pushing us down towards the earth's surface. Correct? But when we are above the surface of the earth, this air column goes on reducing, and therefore we say at higher altitudes the pressure is low. Correct? And at the lower altitudes the pressure is more, because this height of the column goes on reducing as you are moving up from the surface of the earth. Okay, so let us see another picture which will explain you even better about atmospheric pressure. So look at the picture here. This explains us how is the atmospheric pressure working on the earth's surface. So when you are at sea level, okay, or at the surface, so at lower altitudes you have high pressure, and as you move at higher altitudes you have low pressure. So there is less air above you when you are at a height at higher altitudes, and when you are at lower altitudes there is more air above you, therefore more pressure. Okay, therefore I'll give you an example. Whenever you're traveling by flight, okay, by an aeroplane, some people observe that there is blood oozing out from their nose. Correct? Or they can feel that change in the pressure in their ears get blocked. Now this happens because our body already has some pressure inside, because we have blood, we have air, we have empty space in our body, right? Now as you're moving at higher altitudes, your body, which is already used to the atmospheric pressure at the earth's surface or at the ground level, is now at a higher altitude where the pressure is less. So now your body has more pressure, but your surroundings have less pressure, and because of that the blood flowing in your streams just oozes out from your nose. Correct? Therefore the air pressure is filled in your ears. You can feel that change in the air pressure. You can feel your ears are blocked. Okay, this is one of the reasons, the change in the air pressure or the atmospheric pressure, which leads to these things to happen when you move at higher altitudes. Okay, so remember these examples. One more thing, sea level has 1 atmosphere of pressure. You will remember this. So at sea level, if you want to measure pressure, it is 1 atmosphere of pressure. Now look at the picture given here. There's one bottle which is an empty bottle with a cap, and it is floating on the surface of the water. On the contrary, the bottle filled with water floats inside the water but does not go to the bottom. The weight of the empty bottle is negligible as compared with the weight of the water inside, and therefore it floats on the surface, right? And does not go to the bottom. Okay, now let us see why that second bottle, which is filled with water, did not sink completely to the bottom. So here it means that there is some force which is trying to balance the bottle in the upward direction against the gravitational force. Yes? So here we indicate the gravitational force acting downwards as Fg, and the force which is balancing this or opposing this gravitational force in the upward direction as Fb. Okay, this will be the balancing force. Fb will not be Facebook. Okay, this is the force that is balancing, therefore it is Fb. Okay, force which is acting in the upward direction opposing the gravitational force is originated from the water itself, which is surrounding the bottle, correct? Yes. This upward force acting on the object which is in water or any other fluid or gases is called as buoyant force. So here it is being termed as buoyant force, FB. Okay, so that FB, which was the balancing force, is nothing but the buoyant force. So we will see further what is buoyant force and how does it work. So we have a very well explained picture over here explaining buoyant force. There are 4 cylinders shown over here. The red color arrow shows the weight of the displaced fluid and the blue arrow shows the buoyant force exerted by the fluid. First, we use a cork. We all know what is a cork, which is used to close a test tube or maybe a round bottom flask or a conical flask. Okay, so it's a very lightweight object. So when you place it into a fluid or water, you will find that it floats. So the weight is less, therefore the buoyant force is more. Okay. Second example, they have used a wooden ball. We know that wood floats in water. So even here the weight is less and the buoyant force is more. You can see 2 arrows of weight and 3 arrows of buoyant force, which shows that the buoyant force is more. So in these 2 examples, we have positively buoyant force which is being exerted. Okay, look at the third cylinder. Weight is more, we are using an iron ball and the buoyant force is less compared to the weight of the iron ball. Therefore, here it is negatively buoyant. Okay, so this ball is going to sink into the water. Okay, next one. The last cylinder. You can see there are 3 arrows for weight and 3 arrows for buoyant force. Means here the watermelon is going to float in between. It is neither going to be on the surface of the water nor is it going to sink down to the bottom of the cylinder, because here the forces are balanced. So hence it is a neutrally buoyant. So these terms which are given below, positively, negatively, neutrally, that you don't have to remember. That is just for your understanding. You just have to remember this concept of buoyant force. How does it work? So it basically depends on the weight of the object. Okay. So we will see further. Till here everything is clear. So depending on the mass of the object, you have the buoyant force which is being exerted on the object. You have a lighter object, you have more buoyant force. You have a heavier object, you have less buoyant force. Clear? So in the earlier slide, I've explained that more the mass of the object, less is the buoyant force, right? So it means that these huge ships which are sailing in the waters, in the oceans, they are made out of metal, right? So technically they should sink because they have huge mass, correct? Now why is it they do not sink? But if I put an iron nail or I put a coin into the water, it will sink, though it has less mass compared to the ship. Now why does this happen? Let us see. So this is because the weight of the water displaced by the ship is equal to its weight. So it floats. Whereas the weight of the water displaced by the iron nail is less than its weight. So the iron nail sinks. Are you understanding? So it depends on the amount of water which is being displaced by an object when it is put into the fluid, or it is placed into the fluid or water. Okay. In the earlier slide, we saw that a huge ship floats on water, but a tiny iron nail sinks in water. This tells us that buoyant force depends on the volume of the object which is floating. More the volume, more is the buoyant force. Less the volume, less is the buoyant force. Now we see the second factor on which buoyant force depends. We all must have experienced or read or heard that it is easier to swim in sea water than in fresh water. Now have you ever thought why is it so? This is because sea water has salt present into it, which increases the density of the water, whereas fresh water has lesser density, due to which it is easier to swim in sea water because the density is helping you to float in water. Okay, so we have one density experiment which we are doing here. So let us see what do we observe in the experiment. So in this salt water density experiment, we observe that in the left hand side glass, the water is clear, which means it is without salt. This water, we find that the egg sinks down to the bottom. In the other glass, salt is being added to the water, and then when you place the egg into it, you find that the egg floats in water. Correct? So here in salty water, the buoyant force exceeds the gravitational force. Means it is pushing the egg in the upward direction, opposing the gravitational force. Okay. So dear students, from our earlier examples, we can conclude that buoyant force depends on the following two factors. First, volume of the object. So the buoyant force is more if the volume of the dipping object is more. And second is density of the liquid. More the density of the liquid, more is the force of buoyancy. So you can also use the term force of buoyancy or buoyant force. It's one and the same. Okay. Now observe the picture which will be displayed below, which will give you more clarity to this factors which affect buoyant force. Okay. Okay students, now tell me, how is it decided that an object left in a liquid will sink in the liquid, will float on the surface of the liquid, or will float inside the liquid? Let us see how to decide on this with the help of the picture given below. Okay, so here in the picture they have shown us two arrows. The upward arrow is to show that the buoyant force is in the upward direction, and the downward arrow shows that the weight is exerted downwards because of the gravitational pull. Now here, look at the box, the blue box given. So buoyant force, if it's equal to the weight of the object which is placed in the water, then the object floats and remains stationary. Okay. Second, if the buoyant force is greater than the weight of the object, then the object moves up. It floats on the surface of the water, on the top of the surface of the water. Okay. Whereas third factor or third condition, buoyant force, when it is less than the weight of the object sinks into the liquid. So here we have three conditions depending on which we can decide if the object is going to be stationary somewhere in between. Okay, means it's floating but it is stationary, nor will it sink down, nor will it be at the surface. Whereas if you have more buoyant force and lesser weight, the object is floating on the top of the surface of the liquid. Okay, and the third one, when the buoyant force is less but the weight is more of the object sinks down to the bottom of the liquid. Clear? Now observe the picture given here. We have two cylinders. One is an empty cylinder and the other is filled with water. We tie a stone to a rubber band. Now when I place the stone tied to a rubber band, I hold it into the empty container or the beaker. We see that the rubber band is stretched due to the weight of the stone and it is steady at a particular height. Then when I place the same rubber band into the another beaker filled with water, we see that the length of the stretched rubber band slowly gets reduced and is minimum when it sinks completely. So earlier it was stretched more, now it is stretched less. Now why did this happen? Why did this string or the rubber band slowly got reduced or the stretching reduced as soon as you dipped it into a beaker filled with water? So when the stone was dipped into the water, the buoyant force started acting in the upward direction. So the weight of the stone was acting downwards and the force which was acting upwards was the buoyant force. So technically earlier the weight which was acting in the downward direction, it was effectively reduced by the buoyant force, correct? And therefore the string or the rubber band stretched lesser compared to the earlier beaker. Okay. Okay, so everybody has understood the earlier activity, the reason behind the rubber band stretching less compared to the earlier beaker. Okay. Now, have you ever thought what is the magnitude of this buoyant force which is being exerted on the object dipped in water? Or is it same for all liquids? Or is the buoyant force of equal magnitude for all objects? Yes, so the answer for all these questions is given in our Archimedes principle, which we are learning in our next slide. Okay. Look at the picture here. We have a left hand side picture showing a beaker filled with water. We have an object which weighs 10 kg attached to a weighing scale. Here the weight is shown 10 kgs. Now when we dip it into the beaker, we'll see what is the change. Now as we dip it into the water, we see the weight has reduced to 6 kgs. Now this reduction in the weight is because of the buoyant force. So if the weight is been shown 4 kgs less after dipping into the water, it means that a buoyant force of 4 kgs is being applied on the body which is inside the water. Okay, so here buoyant force is equal to the weight of displaced water. So whatever increase in the height of the water is nothing but the amount of buoyant force exerted on the body. Okay, so here because of this 10 kgs object displaces 4 kgs of water and it feels like it only weighs 6 kgs under water. So remember, whenever an object is immersed into the water, whatever is the displacement is equal to the buoyant force. Okay, displacement of whom? Displacement of the liquid is equal to the buoyant force exerted on the body. So we'll see our principle, Archimedes principle. So our Archimedes principle states that when an object is partially or fully immersed in a fluid, a force of buoyancy acts on it in the upward direction. This force is equal to the weight of the fluid displaced by the object. The same thing which I explained you earlier. Now here the word partially means half the way, okay? Not completely. Maybe halfway, or fully means completely immersed into the water. So this principle is clear with everyone. We'll move further. So we just now learned what is Archimedes principle, but we also need to know who gave us this principle, right? So this was given to us by a Greek scientist named Archimedes. He was a scientist and a mathematician. He found the value of pi by numerical calculations. He was also known for his knowledge of levers, pulleys, wheels in physics. He also used this knowledge for the Greek army in fighting against the Rome army. He was also famous because of his work in geometry and mechanics. Now this principle, Archimedes principle, how was it discovered? Now one fine day he was in his bathtub taking bath, and suddenly he came up with this idea looking at the overflowing water from the bathtub. Yes, and he came out running from the bathtub shouting, "Eureka! Eureka!" Yes, the word Eureka means I found it, I found it. And this is how he found out that whenever a body or an object is placed into the water, whatever is the amount of water displaced is equal to the buoyant force exerted on the body, which is our Archimedes principle. Now this principle is applied everywhere around the world. So we saw the concept is used even for our ships which sail into the water bodies. This principle is also used in submarines. The instruments such as lactometer, hydrometer are based on the same principle. So basically if they ask you applications of this principle, these are the applications of the Archimedes principle. Okay. Okay, so in the earlier slide we have learned about the Archimedes principle. We learned that whenever any object is immersed partially or completely into a liquid, it displaces a liquid equal to the mass of the object. So here, when we are talking about density, okay, density of a substance, it is nothing but mass with respect to the volume that it is occupying. So whenever we find density of water, density of any liquid or density of solid, means we are finding the ratio of its mass and the volume that it is occupying. Please understand these are two different terms. Mass is the content of the body, whatever is inside that object or that liquid, that is the mass. Or to make it very simple to you, the number of particles present in a substance gives it its mass, and volume is the space occupied by the substance. It can be liquid, solid or gas. Okay, so we have our formula here for density. Whenever they ask you to find density of any substance, you have this formula, that is mass upon volume. The SI unit of density is kg per meter cube. Now how did we get this unit? What is the unit for mass? It is kg, right? Mass is nothing but weight. So kg upon, what is the unit for volume? Meter cube. Therefore our SI unit is kg per meter cube. The property density is very useful in deciding the purity of the substance. Then we have something known as the relative density of a substance, and it is expressed with respect to density of water. So relative density is density of any substance compared to density of water. So we have our formula for relative density, that is density of substance upon density of water. Now here you are dividing one density with another density, right? So since the ratio is of two equal quantities, therefore the same units get cancelled, and therefore relative density will not have any unit. Okay, density has unit, but relative density will not have any unit. Now just remember that relative density of a substance is also known its specific gravity. Okay. Now let us start with some word problems or numericals based on the topic, or you can just recollect all the formulas which we have studied till now. One was the pressure formula, then we discussed the density formula, and then the relative density. Okay. First example, the area of the bottom of a tiffin box is 0.25 meter square and weight is 50 Newton. Calculate the pressure exerted by the box on the shelf. So here area given to us is 0.25 meter square. Weight of the box is 50 Newton. Remember, whenever they give you any value with Newton, that will be the weight given to you. We have to find the pressure. So pressure is equal to force upon area. Now here weight will be nothing but the amount of force exerted by the body on the surface. Correct? So we will be writing for force 50 Newton upon 0.25 meter square. You can remove the decimal and take zeros on top. Then you reduce the values and you will get 200 Newton per meter square. Unit is very simple because we know the unit of force and area, and hence our answer will be 200 Newton per meter square. Let us start with example 2. Calculate the relative density of iron if the density of water is 10 raised to 3 kg per meter cube and the density of iron is 7.85 into 10 raised to 3 kg per meter cube. So they have given us density of water and density of iron. Okay. Now we know that relative density is nothing but density of a substance upon density of water. So we are going to write down our formula, density of iron upon density of water, which is 7.85 into 10 raised to 3 kg per meter cube upon 10 raised to 3 kg per meter cube. Okay. Which is equal to 7.85. Now here 10 raised to 3, 10 raised to 3 will get cancelled. So we get 7.85. Just make a correction. For density of iron, here the unit is printed kg per meter cube. By mistake, the 3 is printed down. Okay. So this was a simple question. They have directly asked you for relative density. Already two densities are given. So you have to just remember the formula. For every sum, please make sure that you are writing the formula. Okay. And your final answer statement also. Let us start with example 3. The area of the tip of a screw is 0.5 millimeter square and its weight is 0.5 Newton. Calculate the pressure in pascals exerted by the screw on the wooden plank. First of all, I have told you that whenever they give you Newton with any of the values, it is nothing but the weight given to you. Okay, so here they have given us weight of the screw is 0.5 Newton. Area is 0.5 millimeter square. Now I am going to change this to meter. So divide by 1000. Correct? But here it is millimeter square. So twice I will have to divide 0.5 with 1000. So I am dividing 0.5 by 1000 into 1000, which is 10 raised to 6. So when I take it above, it will be 10 raised to minus 6. Understanding? So here we have area and weight both given to us. So pressure will be weight upon area, which is 0.5 Newton upon 0.5 into 10 raised to minus 6 meter square, which is equal to 10 raised to 6 Newton per meter square. Now why did I convert to meter square? Because 1 Newton per meter square is nothing but 1 Pascal. So that's why I have converted millimeter square to meter square. Okay. I'll be just adding the calculation in the next slide for this example 3, that how did you get 10 raised to minus 6. So just to clarify your doubt, I'll be adding up a calculation slip to the next slide. We move to our example 4. Mass of a block of metal is 10 kgs and its dimensions are length 50 centimeter, breadth 10 centimeter and height 20 centimeter. You can see the figure given below for reference. Okay. If the metal block is placed on the following surface on the table, find out on which of the surface ABC or CDEF or BCFG will the pressure exerted on the table be maximum. Okay, so they have given us a box, okay, a metal block, and they have given its dimensions. They are asking us that which surface will have maximum pressure exerted if it is placed on the floor or on that table. So if I place A, B, C, D, can you look at A, B, C, D? Yes. If I place A, B, C, D on the table, or I place C, D, E, F. C, D, E, F. So first surface is the yellow surface, then the orange one, and then the blue surface. So if I rotate the block, okay, and if I place that yellow side on the table, on the surface of the table, or I place the orange side on the surface of the table, or I place the blue side on the surface of the table, which position will have more pressure exerted, or which surface will have more pressure exerted? This is what they are asking us in the question. Okay, now in the second surface, how did we get weight 9800 upon 5? We have got this because just to make our calculations simpler, we have multiplied with 100 in both numerator and denominator. So instead of 98 Newton, I got 9800 Newton upon, instead of 0.05, I'll get only 5, which will make my calculation easier. And therefore, I get 1960 pascals. So please don't get confused, okay? Next surface, that is BCFG, the blue surface. Height is 20, breadth is 10. Therefore, area is length into breadth, that is 200 centimeters square. When I convert to meters, it becomes 0.02 meters square. Means I am dividing by 10,000. Okay. Then we find the pressure. Pressure is nothing but weight upon area. So it is 98 Newton upon area, that is 0.02 meters square. Now here, why have I not converted this by multiplying with 100 as we did in the second one? Because 98 is divisible by 0.02. So we can do that. Okay. So this calculation is your choice, whether you want to convert the decimals or keep them as it is and solve. Whatever is convenient for you, you're going to do it. So answer is 4900 pascals. Now compare the three values, 980 pascals, 1960 pascal and 4900 pascals. So the third surface has maximum pressure, that is surface BCFG. So it proves that smaller the area of contact, larger is the pressure. Okay, I'll give you a simple example for this. You try to push a nail into a wall, okay, with a hammer, and you try to put a screw, a pointed screw, the pointed end, whichever, instead of nail, okay, screw has a pointed end, a sharp end. So instead of a blunt end, a sharp end is going to pierce into the wall more easily. Okay. Let us start with example 5. A piece of marble tile weighs 100 grams in air. If its density is 2.5 gram per cc, means cubic centimeter or centimeter cube, what will be its weight in water? First, weight is given to us, that is in air, that is 100 grams. Density is 2.5 gram per cc. Now we know our formula, density is equal to mass upon volume. Mass is given to us, density is given to us. Volume is not given to us. So to find volume, if I rearrange the formula, I'll get volume is equal to weight upon density, that is 100 grams upon 2.5 gram per cc. Okay, I reduce this, I'll get 40 cc. Now how did I get cc? Because gram and gram got cancelled. Okay, only cubic centimeter is remaining. Okay, therefore, according to the Archimedes principle, when the piece is dipped in water, water of equal volume means the volume equal to the piece of marble tile, that is 40 cc, will be displaced. The loss in the weight of the piece will be equal to the weight displaced, equal to the weight of the displaced water, which will be 40 grams. Therefore, weight in water will be 100 grams minus the displaced water, minus 40 grams, which will be 60 grams. So, the tile when placed in water will appear to be 60 grams instead of 100 grams. Understanding how we got this? We first found the volume of the tile, which was 40 cc. So this much will be the volume of the water also, which will be given out when you immerse the tile. Correct? Therefore, if I subtract this volume from the actual volume of the tile, okay, will give me the weight of the tile when immersed in water. So this much lighter it will appear when placed in water. So whatever water will be displaced outside, the same reduction in the weight of the tile will be observed here. So my answer is 100 grams minus 40 grams is equal to 60 grams. Okay. Here are some answers discussed for the exercise given behind in your textbook. Question 1. Fill in the blanks. The SI unit of force is Newton. The air pressure on our body is equal to the atmospheric pressure. For a given object, the buoyant force in liquids of different density is different. The SI unit of pressure is Newton per meter square. Second is match the column. You can see I've already written the correct answer, so you can just try it out on your own and then verify your answer looking at this video. Okay. Now let us start with question 5. Question 3 and 4, you can easily get the answers in the textbook, and during the video also I have explained few of them, so you will be able to answer them for sure. Okay. Question 5, complete the following tables. They have given us 3 tables here. First one has mass and volume given, and we have to find the density. Now you will see some of the columns are blank, some are filled, so it is not fixed that only density. So in the first table, you can see in that the first sub question they have asked us density to find. Second sub question, they have given us volume and density, we have to find the mass. So here you will have to use our same formula of density, but rearrange the formula as per the requirement. Okay. Next one, they have given density of metal, density of water and relative density. Again we have our formula, relative density is equal to density of substance upon density of water. So here it will be density of metal upon density of water. Okay, so accordingly you will have to rearrange your formula and get your answer. So for first one, density of metal. So I'll write relative density is equal to density of metal upon density of water. Therefore, density of metal will be equal to relative density into density of water. Okay? And you will get your answer. Third one, they have given us weight and area and pressure. So in the first sub question, they have given us area and pressure. We have to find the weight. Second sub question, they have given us weight and area. We have to find the pressure. So for each of the table here, I will be solving one question of each in the next slide. The remaining question you will have to solve on your own in the notebook. So from your exercise, you are going to solve this question 5 completely in your notebook along with the solution which I am showing in the next slide. Clear? You are writing only question 5. Next, I'll tell you what is to be written after this. Okay? So just look at the solution given in the next slide. Now we start at question 6. It's a word problem again. The density of metal is 10.8 into 10 raised to 3 kg per meter cube. Find the relative density of metal. Now we know a formula. Relative density of a substance is nothing but density of substance upon density of water. So density of metal is already given to me, that is 10.8 into 10 raised to 3 kg per meter cube. Now we know that density of water is 1 gram per centimeter cube. So if I convert 1 gram centimeter cube into kg per meter cube, it becomes 1000 kg per meter cube. Now why am I converting into kg per meter cube? Because the other density given here is in kg per meter cube. Okay, if it was given in gram per centimeter, then no need to convert it to kg per meter cube. Okay, so density of substance upon density of water, which is 10.8 into 10 raised to 3 upon 1000. 10 raised to 3 is nothing but 1000. So 1000 and 1000 gets cancelled and my answer is 10.8. Now as I told you, relative density never has a unit because you are dividing two same physical quantities, that is one density upon the other density. Okay, you are going to write this question in your fair classwork notebook, science notebook. You'll write the question and then you will write the solution for the same numerical. Okay, solve question 7, which is a numerical again. Volume of an object is 20 centimeter cube and mass is 50 grams. Density of water is 1 gram per cm cube. Whenever they write cm raised to minus 3, it is per means upon g upon centimeter cube. So if you are writing centimeter up, instead of writing in fraction form, you write it as centimeter raised to minus 3. Will the object float on water or sink in water? So we know the volume, we know the mass. I'll first find the density. So mass upon volume will give me 50 upon 20, which is 2.5 grams. So this density is more compared to density of water. Means it is heavier than water and therefore the object is going to sink in water. Now this question you are going to write in your notebook, science notebook. Okay. Now let us start with question 8. The volume of a plastic covered sealed box is 350 centimeter cube and the box has a mass of 500 grams. Will the box float on water or sink in water? What will be the mass of water displaced by the box? First of all, you'll write what is given to us. They have given us volume of the box. They have given us mass of the box. So I'll first find the density. Whenever they ask you whether an object will sink or float, always you have to find a density. So density of object is mass of object upon volume of object, which is 500 upon 350. After reducing, first cancel the zeros up and down as many possible. Then after reducing, I'll get 1.43 gram per centimeter cube. Now even in our earlier question, we know that density of water is 1 gram per cm cube. This you will remember always, okay? Since the density of box is greater than the density of water, therefore the object is going to sink in water, means it's heavier. So we have answered the first question. Second question, what will be the mass of water displaced by the box? Now as per the Archimedes principle, volume of liquid displaced is equal to volume of the object, which is 350 centimeter cube. Therefore mass of displaced liquid upon density of displaced liquid will give me the volume. Correct? So volume is what? 350 cm cube. The same above formula they have written down in fraction form. Okay. Then, therefore mass of a liquid which will be displaced will be 350 into 1, which is 350 grams. So whatever is the volume of the box, same amount of water will be displaced, and therefore the answer is 350 grams. Okay, even this question 8 you are going to write down in your science classwork notebook. Okay, copy the question first, then you will solve this entire solution in your notebook. Try to do on your own, and then for reference you can look at the video. So thank you dear students for listening with a lot of patience and attention to the video. I hope you have understood what has been explained in the video. Whatever exercise questions have been asked to write in the notebook, please complete that. You will be studying the entire topic, you will be studying all the questions, but for time being we are just writing few numericals in the notebook. Okay, so don't worry about what is to be written in the notebook and what not. Just focus on your studies. So you are requested to read the chapter once thoroughly, then you will go through the video again. Okay, and then try to answer the questions which are given behind the textbook. Okay, all the best and God bless you all.